Welcome to the CAD Office training series for FDOT Connect for OpenBridge Modeler. My name is Heather Purin and I'm a structural engineer with WSP USA. In this video, we'll be covering exercise 3.1 from the Bridge Design 3D Modeling and Plans course guide. This exercise demonstrates reviewing the FDOT Connect workspace and creating a work set. Let's get started. This is the first video in the Bridge Design 3D Modeling and Plans series. Since it's the first video, we're going to go over some background information and nomenclature, as well as download the dataset before we jump into exercise 3.1. We'll go through exercise 3.1, where we'll practice creating a work set, and then we'll create a new design file using the FDOT Create File tool. After the exercise, we'll take a moment to go over some basics of the FDOT Connect software within OBM. Although the exercises start at the end of Chapter 3, I recommend that you review the content of Chapters 1 through 3 if you're not familiar with OpenBridge Modeler and the FDOT Connect workspace. I'd like to take a moment to discuss software versions. Bentley releases new versions of OpenBridge Modeler, and FDOT subsequently develops new versions of the FDOT Connect software with each new release. We do our best to future-proof our course guides, but just for your information, the currently published course guide and the associated dataset was developed using OBM and FDOT Connect 10.12. The associated training videos use OBM and FDOT Connect 2023. Depending on the version you're using, your screen may look slightly different. However, the content remains applicable for both versions and should remain so moving forward into OBM and FDOT Connect 2024 and beyond. I'd also like to mention that starting with OBM 2023, Bentley allowed the use of an alternative workflow where the 2D decorations can be placed in a separate model, closer to the ORD workflow. Although not included in the FDOT Bridge Design 3D Modeling and Plans course guide, we posted a standalone white paper and accompanying video explaining the alternative 2D to 3D workflow. For those that are new to OBM, ORD, and MicroStation Connect Edition, I'd like to take a moment to explain the distinction between workspace, workset, and workflow, since we use these words often when working with FDOT Connect. The workspace is synonymous with FDOT Connect, which is a CAD software developed by FDOT to provide all the necessary resources, tools, and customization that's required on FDOT projects and must be used for compliance, and includes template files and the proper feature definitions. The work set is the folder structure and the associated files for a given project, including all the different disciplines. Usually it's named with the FPID number. The workflow is a drop-down menu in the upper left-hand corner of OpenBridge Modeler that sets what tabs are displayed on the ribbon. We'll be focusing on the OpenBridge Modeler and drawing workflows, and we'll point these out when we get into the program. A design file is where your 2D line work or 3D bridge model would reside. The sheet file is where your plans production would take place. These terms were created by FDOT as a way to categorize within the FDOT Create File tool. The only difference between these two types of files are the file naming convention, the seed file used, and the actions that come in at the bottom of the window. In terms of the file group shown in the graphic, there is only one design file group for structures, while there are many sheet file groups, for example, superstructure, substructure, structure, other, and so on. A DGN file, or OBM design file, is a container for project data. This is a generic Bentley term, different than the design file and sheet file discussed in the previous slide, as it relates to the FDOT Create File tool. Within this DGN file, you can have one or more models, shown in the top left graphic, as nested under the DGN file. The design model, generally the default model upon new file creation, is where your 3D bridge model would live. That's the top line of the model's dialog box in the bottom right graphic. In the bottom right graphic, the type column and the 2D/3D columns in the model's dialog box lets you know the model type, design, drawing, or sheet, and if the model is 2D or 3D. A design model can be 2D or 3D, but drawing and sheet models are only 2D. In a model-centric workflow, the drawing model will be where your 3D bridge in the design model would be referenced and have annotations added. The sheet model is where the drawing model and annotations are then referenced onto an actual sheet border. This sheet model will also be 1-to-1, meaning you'll have an 11 by 17 border if that's the border you're using, and that would measure exactly 11 inches by 17 inches. So the line work is essentially scaled down to fit. This is different than previous FDOT workflows in the Select series, where you would scale a border to fit the content. Now we scale the content to fit the border. While you can have as many models as you'd like, we generally recommend to have the design model where the 3D model lives in a separate DGN file and create a separate sheet file to reference a 3D model into. This has two main advantages. One is that it keeps the files smaller so they are less clunky. And two is that it allows for the separation of tasks. Someone can be working in the OBM model while someone else works in the drawings. For this reason, you may also consider having one sheet model per DGN so that multiple people could work on different sheet files in a production crunch. When you install the FDOT Connect workspace, you'll see an FDOT Connect folder on your desktop and in your programs. Within this folder, you'll find shortcuts to the FDOT Connect versions of any installed software: OBM, OBD, ORD, MicroStation Connect, ProStructures, along with some BIM tools, FDOT CAD resources, quantity tools, compliance tools, and tools to help if OBM becomes unstable for whatever reason. I want to specifically mention ClearCrash and Workspace Doctor. ClearCrash is what you should use to crash the program if it freezes, similar to a Control-Alt-Delete. And Workspace Doctor can be used to clear crash as well as delete some user settings and restore them back to default. You can also access which version of Bentley and FDOT software you have installed, as well as access the Workspace install location and Workset folder. Before we begin exercise 3.1, let's download the OBM dataset from the FDOT website. In Chapter 1 of the Bridge Design 3D Modeling and Plans course guide, it discusses how to download the dataset as well as where to place the files. There's a link to where the dataset can be found, but it's the same website where you'll find the course guide, which you can also easily find by doing a Google search for FDOT OBM course guide. On this page, you'll find a link to the course guide itself, and below that, you'll see some additional links. You have a link for the dataset, as well as several other workflows, including the 2D to 3 workflow that was discussed previously. Clicking the dataset link will download the dataset to your Downloads folder. Currently, the version of the dataset that is on the website uses FDOT Connect 10.12. We'll also be posting a version that uses FDOT Connect 2023. These are the same exact files and the same exact dataset, just with the files uplifted to OBM 2023. If you have OBM 2023, you can use either of the datasets. You'll just get a notice to uplift the files if you use the 10.12 version. So to get started, we will unzip the dataset files. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and unzip them directly into the downloads folder, the same place that the zip file is. You can see now that I have the OBM dataset folder, which has the same name as a zip file. So if you go into this folder, you'll see that there's one folder and two other files, configuration folder or a file and a DGNWS file. Once you have these, you can go ahead and copy them over into the workset folder. Because I have a workstation install, the location of my workset folder is directly on my C drive. If you have a different install or have different drives mapped, you'll need to place the workset files wherever your workset folder is on your computer. So I'll go ahead and copy these and paste them into the C worksets FDOT folder. Once the dataset is copied over, we can confirm that it has been included in our worksets in the program. So I'll go ahead and launch, in this case, FDOT 2023 OBM. As a reminder, you always want to open your files using the FDOT 2023 workspace. You don't want to open it using just the default out-of-the-box Bentley version. You always want to open with the FDOT 2023 or whichever version you're using workspace. So you can see here that I've got the OBM 2023 software open. If I go into custom configuration, that's where you'll find the FDOT workspace. And then under work set, you can see that the data set that I just copied into that folder is now an option. So once I click that, I can hit browse, and now I can go in and I can access all of the dataset files. The dataset files include a _begin version of all of the exercises. That way you don't have to start from scratch. If you want to just work on one particular exercise, you can directly start with that exercise by opening the associated begin DGN. Now let's jump into exercise 3.1. You can follow along in the course guide if you'd like. Let's take a look at where FDOT Connect stores information on your C drive if you do the standalone workstation install. There are two main folders where it stores information. One of them is the FDOT Connect folder, which you'll see on the left-hand side. This is where the workspace itself for FDOT Connect is installed, including configuration and other resource files. The average user shouldn't need to make any modifications or really go into this folder very often. However, if you go into the Organization Civil folder, you've got the various configuration files for ORD, OBM, microstation, ProStructures, and you'll see in this FDOT folder there are additional resources. So this is your DGN lib files, your seed files, things like that. Again, most users don't really need to go in here. It just is where the program is pulling the information for the workspace from. So the folder on the right is the worksets folder. That's where we copied our dataset into. So this is the folder where most users would navigate more frequently. In this case, again, it's on my C drive, but in practice, it'll likely be on a network drive or on ProjectWise or some other cloud platform. Within this folder, this is where project-specific information is stored, including all of the DGNs. So again, this is a folder that would generally have the FPID number as the folder name. So the workset template folder is the base folder which gets copied when you create a new workset within the program. So when we create a new workset, it'll basically duplicate this workset template folder, and that'll give you your folder structure that's required for FDOT projects. So we already mentioned earlier how to launch the program itself. So one of them is within the FDOT Connect folder or the FDOT Connect OBM shortcut that we discussed earlier. You can also add a shortcut to the start menu or to the taskbar if you'd like. So again, want to reiterate that regardless of which way you launch the program, you want to make sure that you are using OpenBridge Modeler for FDOT Connect. Do not double click on a file because you might end up opening it in an incorrect version or an incorrect program depending on what the defaults you have your computer set to. Again, FDOT projects, make sure you open within FDOT Connect. The standalone OBM application won't have the proper configuration ribbons and templates that we need to be compliant with FDOT Connect. Another note is to make sure that you don't open files created within ORD or MicroStation within OBM. Always make sure that you attach any roadway or other discipline features as references for your bridge model. As a note, if you have OpenBridge Designer installed, your path to launch the program is going to look a little bit different. OpenBridge Designer is essentially the link between OBM and other analysis software that Bentley offers, such as LeapBridge Concrete or Steel or RMBridge. So in this case, in this demonstration, we're going to be launching directly with FDOT Connect for OpenBridge Modeler, which we already have open here. So within OpenBridge Modeler, you can access files that are stored on ProjectWise. That was the folder or the window that I closed earlier. And you can also navigate directly to those workset folders that I was showing you within the File Explorer. So on the left here, you'll see if you had any recent worksets, you'd be able to access them. And down here, you would see any recent files that you have accessed recently. So you can see here that we have this new file button. So you might think that this is how you want to create a new file. That would be the case if we were not working within the FDOT Connect software. However, because we are working within the FDOT Connect software, we do not want to use this file. We want to use the FDOT Create File tool that FDOT has developed in order to make sure that you are using proper seed files, that we're using the proper naming conventions, things like that. We'll create a new file coming up shortly, but first we're going to practice creating a new work set. So up here at the top, the workspace is FDOT, and the work set currently is the data set that we downloaded. So for this exercise, we're going to practice creating a new work set as if we did not have a data set provided. So if I click the drop down, you can see at the bottom, it says Create Work Set. So you click Create Work Set here, and then you type out your work set name. So in this case, we're just going to call it the same thing as a data set, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, 1 underscore test. So you can add in a description if you'd like. In this case, we're going to leave it blank. For the template, we're going to select the 0 work set template. So like I mentioned earlier, that makes sure that you have the proper folder structure and that they are saved in the right location. You can see when I clicked work set template that all of these options down here got grayed out because it's all going to be controlled by the work set template. So I'll click OK now. And you can see that we have this work set here, this new one, with underscore test. So you can see in the work set folder that there is a new folder. So this is a data set, and what we just created right now is the test version of the work set. So this is just a clean work set. So now that we've practiced creating a new work set, we're going to go back into our actual data set work set, and that's where we're going to work for the rest of the training. So now that we're within our dataset workset, again, we're not going to use this new file. We're going to go to Browse and then scroll to the bottom, and we're going to open up that blank file. So the only purpose of this blank file DGN is to get you into the FDOT Connect workspace in order to use the Create File tool. In the next part of the exercise, we're going to practice creating a New File. Now that we are within the blank file DGN, we are able to access the Create File tool. As you can see here, we have a warning that says the file should not be used for FDOT work. Again, the whole reason to get into this blank file is just so that you can access the FDOT Create File tool. So up at the top left, let's make sure that we change to the OpenBridge Modeler workflow, and then over to the FDOT tab, you can see that we have the Create File tool. So we will go ahead and create a file or a DGN using this tool. So the window probably looks familiar from the SS10 days. It's the same application, just moved over and reorganized. As you can see here, the work set that is shown is grayed out. This is the work set that we created earlier. So whenever you use a Create File tool, you'll be creating a new file in the current work set. So the discipline here, currently structures, is selected. There are several disciplines that you can choose from. We are going to use structures. There's also structures, mechanical, electrical, structures, non-bridge specific, and structures, walls. For now, we're going to go ahead and use structures. So that's the discipline. So the second level of organization here is the file group. So the file group also has several options within structures here. So the main ones that we work with are, we talked about this earlier, sheet files or design files. So in this case, we're going to be creating an OBM model. So that would be a structures design file. So within the structures design file, it's now filtered it down to these 4 files. So we've got the alignment and super elevation. That's if you did not have an alignment file provided to you by your civil team, you could use this file and you could create some alignments and profiles yourself if needed. We've got the bridge 2D plan. So this is if you were not developing an OBM model in 3D, or if you wanted to use a 2D layout as a starting point, you could always create a 2D layout file, a DSGN file, and then after that use it to help you create the 3D MODLBR file. This one here, the B-pound MODLBR file, this is the one that we're going to be using here. And then the bottom one is similar to the top one in that if you needed to create a terrain file specifically for bridge design, if you needed to convert that over from say like a TIN file or something, you could create a file, convert that over, and then you could use that file as a reference in your bridge model. So you can see that there's some information down here for the output file. So in addition to giving the file name here, so we've got some things that are locked, right? So this is part of the compliance for FDOT. You want to make sure that you know, it starts with B and it's got MODLBR in it. However, what we can control here is the bridge sequence number, which in our case we're going to just use 01, and then the modifier. So this is optional, you don't need to add one. In this case, we're going to go ahead and add TR to show that this is a training document or DGN, and then the file sequence will start at 1 automatically, and then as you create new files, it would tick up the file sequence at 1, 02, 03 in case you wanted to create several files at the same time. So the output folder by default is the structures folder, which is where we want it to live. And the seed file by default will be the FDOT OBM structure seed 3D. So you can see that both of these are green. You can browse to different locations for both the seed file and the output folder, but the file type that you select will control those to begin with. So for the county here, we want to select Pasco in our case, and you will not have to change the coordinate system because that comes in automatically when the county is selected. So in this case, we don't have any actions here in the action dialog box, but again, some of the file types will have some actions. You can either keep those if you'd like. It's mostly for creating different models before you get into the file. In our case, there are none, You are also welcome to delete those if they are there. It's really up to you. So I'll go ahead and select Create Open File, and we'll see that Create File, or rather the FDOT blank file DGN is closed. Up at the top, you can see now our new file has been created. So this is just a blank empty file that we're going to move forward with our exercises. So you can see that the file sequence has ticked up to O2. If you wanted to create a new file and open that one, you could. We are going to go ahead and close it and open up the completed bridge model to review the software and go over some features. You don't have to follow along with this, but if you'd like to, you would go File, Open, Browse, and then within the Dataset Workset in the Structures folder, there's a Select Completed Exercises folder. And within there is the 5.9 end file, and 5.9 is the last of the bridge modeling exercises of the course guide. So if you have the 10.12 dataset and you have a newer version of the software, there will be a window telling you to update the file, which is fine. So this bridge model is the result of all the exercises in the course guide. And we're going to use it to talk about some features and some setup. So first we'll go through the interface setup regarding how you could dock some toolboxes and windows. So I'll go ahead and undock this, and I'll get rid of some of these that are not where they would be if you just install the software. So we'll talk about the tools later on, but for now we're just going to talk about getting everything set up. So within the Home tab of the OpenBridge Modeler workflow, or really any of the workflows, you have this primary group, and it's got several tools here. So again, we'll talk about those in a little bit, but for now, we'll just talk about where we can dock them. So by default, it might have the windows as just floating, but if you click on the top and drag them around, you can see that these little icons on the left and the right allow you to dock this window. So again, you have those appear by just clicking the top of the window and starting to move it around. And if you move it over there, it'll dock on the left. I usually keep the Explorer on the left if I do have it docked. Although I hear that having the Explorer docked can sometimes cause problems, so maybe you want to just keep that floating. Your level display, that's another one that, again, this is just personal preference. Prefer to keep it on the left. And then we've got the properties dialog box that we had open before. I'll go ahead and redock that to the right. The properties window, I generally just keep docked on the right, always. So we'll have a couple other things here, our references. So this I usually put on the bottom because it's kind of a long dialog box. And then I'll do the same with the models here. And you can see now with all of these docked, there's not a lot of room to work in the view window. So the way that you can help that out is on the right side of all of these dialog boxes, there's this little push pin. If you click that, you'll see that they're now docked, but they are hidden unless you hover over these little tabs here. So that's the way that you can have them docked and have them easy to access, but not be taking up a lot of room on your screen. And regarding room on your screen, there's also another way that that you can give yourself a little bit more room if you'd like. In the area up at the top here, if you double click any of the tabs, it'll get rid of the tools here, and then if you click on the tab, it'll show them. So if you want to gain a little bit more screen real estate, you can do that. And again, these are all just kind of personal preferences. You can customize it however you'd like. You can also customize the ribbons and the groups if you'd like. If you right click up here, there's this customize ribbon option. You don't have to, but if you'd like to, you can rearrange how everything looks. It's very customizable. So the other thing that I usually keep docked at the bottom, we'll make sure that AccuDraw is there, as well as the key in, as well as snap mode. So I'll dock these here at the bottom. So similarly, just grab the dialog box or the window and then bring it to the bottom wherever you'd like to dock it. So you'll see that I use this search ribbon up here. So this is a very handy tool because, as you can tell, toggling through workflows, toggling through various tabs, there's a lot going on and it's not all visible at the same time. So you can use this search ribbon to bring up any tool that you'd like. All you have to do is start typing, and then there's predictive text for what tools you're talking about. So for an example, if I wanted to just draw a line, I could type the word line and all of the different results for line pull up. So you can see there's kind of a lot, but if I wanted to do place smart line, you could hover over that and you can either click it to start the tool, or it actually shows you and kind of teaches you where things are at. So I'm in the OpenBridge Modeler workflow, so if I were to go into the Reports and Drawing tab in the Placement group, I would also find the Place Line or Place Smart Line tool. So it's helpful to both teach you and to just pull up the tool itself. So as you can see with the line tool, it actually exists we'll do Place Line. It actually exists in various workflows. So if you hover over it, it's in the OpenBridge Modeler workflow, as well as the drawing workflow and the geospatial context workflow and the modeling workflow. So they put the tools in various different workflows for your use there. So moving on from the interface setup piece, we'll talk a little bit about the FDOT tab here. So this FDOT tab replaced the red discipline menu from the Select Series MicroStation FDOT workspace. So we already talked about and used the Create File tool over here, but we'll talk about a couple other tools here. So we've got the Plan Set Manager. So this one is very important for sheet creation. We've got the cell libraries over here. So this has the specific FDOT cell libraries. And I can actually open up the cell libraries. That's another thing that we can dock to the bottom. We also have some geotechnical tools, and then the structures group right here. We've got the standards packager as well as steel shapes, and then the rebar chart. So there is a separate webinar on how to use the rebar chart that you can take a look at, and there will be a video in this course guide series discussing how to use the spreadsheet that rebar chart creates in order to place it into a sheet model. So after that, we've got the quantities, and these are the FDOT quantities, which are actually different than the built-in OBM quantities, and that is helpful to set up your FDOT formatted quantities and generate that structures report final. We'll talk about this tool in a later video as well. You've got your QA tools, your quick check for the file that you're in, or do the QC for the project itself. So this will make sure that your levels, your file names, that everything is in compliance. We've got several resources here with links to FDOT's website. So there's a lot of good stuff within this FDOT tool here. So we'll talk a little bit about views. So we've got our kind of traditional wireframe view, just a 2D view that's open in view 1. So you can see if I rotate it around, it actually is 3D, but by default, that view is just a top view and it's wireframe. So that's kind of what it looks like there. Now you could go into your second view window, and you can see in the second view window here that this is the a 3D kind of rendered. I believe the display style is called illustration ignore lighting. So this is another way to view your model. And if you go in the view tab, you can tile these windows if you wanted to look at them side by side and navigate them that way. You could do that. There are other views. There's 8 views that you can work with, and they each have kind of a default display style, but you can always go through and change them, right? If I didn't want, we'll do view 3 as an example. This is looks like a front view with wireframe, but if you wanted to, you could go through and you could change the display style to, any of these other ones. So we'll just pick kind of a random one here. So this is the monochrome. So you can go through and play with these if you'd like, and use any sort of display styles you would like. So we can talk a little bit now about navigating around in 3D, right? So as you would expect, you can, zoom in and out with just your click wheel, right? And you can sort of do that freely, like wherever your cursor is, that's where it's going to zoom in and out of. You can also rotate around freely if you hold down Shift and you hold down the click wheel and kind of rotate around. That's sort of like a freehand rotation. So that is, you can zoom in and then rotate around. It's going to rotate about wherever your cursor is. So some people can do that pretty well, and others find it a little bit disorienting and kind of difficult to do that freehand rotation. So an alternative to that, I'll go ahead and maximize the screen here, is to up in the view window toolbar here. If you click and hold, we've got this rotate view. So when you select rotate view, you'll see that these crosshairs come up. And now what I can do is I can grab this crosshair and I can actually snap it to a point on the model. And sometimes it's a little finicky, so stick with it. But I snapped it to the edge of the footing. So now even if my mouse is over here, I can zoom in and out about the point that it snapped to, and I can also rotate about that point. So you can see how my cursor has this different symbol on it. So now rather than using the click wheel to rotate about, I can use the left mouse button and it will rotate about that point that I've snapped to, kind of regardless of where my cursor is. It will always rotate about that point there. All right, so that's a little bit about navigating around. I'm not going to go into to too much detail on it, but you can also use your ACS to kind of do shortcuts where you hold Shift, right click, and then T for top, and it'll get you back, kind of square with wherever your ACS is oriented. So let's talk a little bit about the Explorer window now. So I will have this floating here, and we'll talk about some of the tools and some of the tabs here. So the OpenBridge standards here, if you drill down, it'll show you the libraries. So these are the libraries that are coming from the DGN lib file. And then those libraries get copied whenever you create a new file. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically at the end of the day, everything gets built into these feature definitions, and then when you place an element in your bridge model, you assign a certain feature definition. And as those are used, they then get pulled into your feature definitions in your OpenBridge standards of the DGN itself. So again, these are just the ones that are currently used. If you were to dig down into the library, you would see that there are many others that are not used. So another tab to talk about is the OpenBridge Model tab. So this is the one where if you drill down here, you'll actually see your bridge elements for the model that you're working with. So this can be used to kind of toggle things on and off. So if I wanted to take a look at my beams, but I didn't want to look at the deck or the barriers, I could come in here and I could toggle off all the barriers at once. I could toggle off all the decks at once, and you'll see that I still have my beams as well as the haunch under there. So you'll see if you drill down that the haunch is actually here's girder one over here. The haunch is actually associated with the beam itself. So that's a good way to kind of navigate and turn on and off elements. if I went in and I turned off all of the beam groups, then I could take a look directly at just my end bent elements or just my pier elements here. So that is a way that you can toggle things on and off. I will say that sometimes this this way of turning things on and off can be a little bit finicky, so I will admit that that sometimes I use it, but often I will just use levels, right? So the difference is when you toggle on and off things in the Explorer, it will turn off both the 3D element and the 2D element, and if you choose to toggle things on and off using the level display, then you'll have to do those separately. So I'm toggling off the deck level here, but the 2D decoration at the 0 elevation is still on. So it's up to you, however you'd like to navigate around there. So the you'll see that I did put my snaps here at the bottom. Those are similar snaps to MicroStation. They're very helpful for measuring, as well as you saw that I used the snaps for the crosshair placement for the rotation tool. That's something that is very helpful to have snaps, as well as if you're going to get kind of like a targeted elevation somewhere, you can use your snaps to snap to the location that you want. So we'll talk about the working units real quick. So there is a way that you can open the design file settings, but we also have a shortcut within the FDOT workspace. If I press spacebar, you'll see this pop-up menu, and it's got a lot of good tools that you can use, and they're kind of organized in a logical way here. But the one that I'm going to talk about now is just the design file settings. So if I click that, you can see that it is, if I go to my working units, that I can toggle between having, feet, inches with an accuracy of 1/16, which if we're doing concrete is usually an eighth. Or you could change it to just master units, and then for accuracy, you can change it to 3 decimal places if you were looking at elevations. So that's a quick way to change your working units. Just a note, OBM does constantly save, so if there's a crash or a power failure, you shouldn't lose your work. As a note though, file settings are not saved, so make sure you save your settings often as you make changes. So that is, again, just kind of a quick rundown of some basics and some interface setup options. Thank you for watching this section of the training series for FDOT Connect. Additional training videos and course guides are available on the CAD Office Training webpage, which may be found at fdot.gov/CAD.